Hi, I'm Stuart. Thanks for taking a look at my video. I hope you enjoy it. In this video I'm going to give my reading wrap up for the week from May 26th through June 1. I'm going to talk about and give reviews of the 2 books I completed during the week, and I'm going to list the new books that I bought during the week. I'm also going to give an update on the Wobbles I worked on, one I created, and one I'm currently working on. The first book I completed this week was Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I read this book as part of a buddy read with Nix at Nix Reads, and I quite enjoyed doing the buddy read. Before I actually give my review of the book, I want to give a short author bio, which is from the back of the book. Heather Fawcett is the author of the Emily Wilde series, as well as a number of books for children and young adults, including Ember and the Ice Dragons, The Grace of Wild Things, the series Even the Darkest Stars. She has a master's degree in English literature and a bachelor's in archaeology. She lives on Vancouver Island. This is a fantasy that tells the story of Emily Wilde. She's a researcher from Cambridge who is creating an encyclopedia of fairies. This will be the first Encyclopaedia of Fairies that was created. The story is set in an alternate version of 1909. In the final parts of her research, Emily travels to Hervasnik Lashland, which is a village in Norway. I'm sure I pronounced the names wrong. Emily is really good at research, but she's not so good with people. Not long after her arrival in the town, which is a small town, so kind of clannish, she runs afoul of the people for reasons she doesn't understand, and it's not apparent as a reader either. Most of the people take a dislike to her. Not long after Emily arrived in town, a colleague of hers, Wendell Bambleby, arrived. He's another researcher from, they're both from Cambridge in England. They have a somewhat interesting relationship. Emily isn't particularly happy to see him. Bambleby has tenure and Emily wants to get tenure. Emily has an interesting companion, a dog named Shadow. The book is written in journal entries, and it also includes footnotes, which gives a interesting authenticity to the book. Most of the journal entries are by Emily, but a few are by Bambleby. I like the way the book gradually talked about various types of fae, and they're often called folk in the book. There were some thrilling, tense parts of the book, but sometimes the book told the story after something occurred, which did take away some of the tension. I would have liked for Emily's and Bamblebee's relationship to go in a different direction than it did. I can't really say the way it did go because that would be a spoiler. I recommend this book for a person with like a somewhat dark fantasy with 2 interesting main characters, a fun dog, a group of interesting supporting characters. I've heard people use the term cozy for this book, and I personally didn't find it remotely cozy. I did enjoy the book a lot, and I'll be reading the next in the series. I rated the book 4 stars. And as a final thought, I just want to say that there's a lot of hype about Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Fairies. I didn't feel it quite lived up to all the hype, but I still found it a very enjoyable read. Now I want to read a short passage from the book so you can get an idea of the writing style. The weather has taken a turn. Some days have proven too foul for me to set foot out of doors. Combination of hail and sleet. I've been able to explore another section of forest where I found a smaller hot spring, and high above the village, the edge of a glacier. I spied several cavernous fissures amongst the ice where the villagers had left food offerings long ago. I wonder what fairy or fairies had abandoned the place. I was not worried about missing my new friend, for the folk are not bound by time in the way that we mortals are. He would have my bread for me whether I visited next week or next month. I sent off a letter to my brother with sufficient funds to purchase a bearskin. He will grumble and write to me with complaints that he is very busy with his shop and his wife, not to mention their 4 children, that he hasn't time to assist with my fairy escapades, but he will send it all the same. Next, I just want to talk a little bit about the method I came up with, how to annotate the book. It wasn't something I thought in ahead of time. As I read it, I decided there's certain things I want to keep track of. First, I just want to talk about my supplies. I got some tabs and some highlighters. This is one of them, the one I chose to annotate the book. I got them from Amazon, and I just use a pen to write my notes. And here's what I actually came up with, which I'll just mention each of the things. But these are the categories I decided to assign specific tab colors to. There's no reason behind the color I picked. It was just the next in line. But I picked tab colors. I picked one for Emily, one for Bambly, because those are the two main characters of the book. I picked one for animals. Mainly that's the dog Shadow, but there were some sheep too. If there were multiple animals, I might have picked a separate one for Shadow and one for the other animals. I picked another color for the supporting people, which were the villagers. I picked another color for the footnotes because there was a lot of footnotes, so I thought that would be a good category by itself. I picked a category for miscellaneous. That's just obviously stuff that didn't fit in any of the other categories. I picked a category for the folk/fairy. As I said, they use various terms. And I picked another category for words new to me. There was a few words that I had never seen before and I had to look up. I don't know as I'll be annotating books regularly, but I did find for the buddy read it worked really well. When I read something that I wanted to add a comment on in the buddy read, I would just put a tab against it, highlight the entry, and later on I'd go back with my pen and write in the note, and at some time later in the day or maybe the next day I would put the comments that I had since the last time I entered comments into the buddy read, which we did in Storygraph. So I found in this case annotating was really good because otherwise I might have to enter my comments anytime I had one. So it worked well for the buddy read. And the second book I completed this week was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This was a book I borrowed on Libby from my library and it's quite popular. It took me a while to get it when I initially entered my hold. And at the time I turned it in, which is actually earlier today, this is Saturday as I record this, there was around 56 people waiting for it. Before I talk about the book itself, I want to give a short author bio, which is from the back of the book. Rebecca Ross was born and raised in Georgia, where she continues to reside with her husband, her lively Australian shepherd, and her endless piles of books. She loves coffee, the night sky, chalk art, maps, the mountains, and growing wildflowers in a yard. And a good story, of course. She's the author of The Queen's Rising, The Queen's Resistance, Sisters of Sword and Song, Dreams Lie Beneath, and A River Enchanted. This book is a dark fantasy romance. It's set in an alternate version of Earth. It's set around the time of World War I. The two main characters are Iris Winnow and Roman Kit. They're both 18 at the time the story starts. In this world, there were 5 gods. They were thought vanquished and dead, but 2 of them recently woke up. They were actually only asleep, these 2 at least. Before they went to sleep, they were at war with one another, and after they woke up, they continued the war. In this case, the war was fought by humans who joined the army of one or the other. Iris and Roman live in a fictional city called Oath. They are both reporters at a local paper. Iris was a very promising student, but her brother Forrest went off to war to join the army of Enva, and that broke Iris's and Forrest's mother, and she lost her job. So Iris had to get a job at the paper to try to support her mother and herself. It's not really going very well. They're really having a struggle to make ends meet. Roman was born in a wealthy family, but it's new wealth, and his father really aspires to be respected by old wealth, who doesn't look fondly upon new wealth. They're both in competition for a columnist job, so their relationship is somewhat contentious. I really love the fantasy elements of the book. I thought the romantic relationship made sense. It went at a reasonable pace. The book does a great job of presenting the horrors of war. It's quite graphic in its detail. I found the book to be beautifully written, but I did think occasionally it was a little too poetic for the scenes that are actually being portrayed. I recommend this book for anyone who likes a dark fantasy romance with two interesting main characters and an appealing supporting cast. I will say that if graphic depictions of war are something you find disturbing, you may want to read content warnings because it doesn't shy away from some very harsh details, which possibly you might not be used to in a book of this type. I'm definitely going to read more books from the author. I rated the book 4.5 stars, and I really felt that it lived up to the hype, and there was a considerable hype on this book. Next, I'm going to read a short passage from the book so you can get an idea of the writing style. Monsters sighted 30 kilometers from the warfront, the headline announced in smudge type. Beneath it was an illustration of a creature with large membranous wings, two spindly legs hooked with talons, and a horde of sharp needle-like teeth. Iris shivered, straining to read the words, but they were indecipherable, melting into streaks of ink. She stared at the paper for a moment longer, frozen on the street corner. Rain dripped from her chin, falling like tears onto the monstrous illustration. Creatures like this didn't exist anymore. Not since the gods had been defeated centuries ago. But of course, if Dacre and Enva had returned, so could the creatures of old. Creatures that long ago only lived in myths. And there's two other books I read part of this week, and the first is On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft by Stephen King. And the second is Seoulmates by Susan Lee. This book here, Seoulmates, I had a goal to read as part of the TBR I came up with for AAPI Heritage Month, which is May. Unfortunately, I didn't do very well at that. I had a goal of reading 8 books. I only completed 2 books and read parts of 2 others. I will read all the books this year, I'm sure, but in retrospect, it was too ambitious a goal for me. And I don't think I'm going to make a goal like that in the future. And there were 4 new books I got this week, 1 a physical book and 3 Nook books. The first is Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This book came as part of a virtual event that I attended that I talked about in the last weekly wrap-up I did. The book is autographed. It is a book plate, which I guess most of us would prefer it right on the page itself, but it's still nice to have an autograph. I recently watched a video by Tia at Tia Chu, where she talked about books she suggested reading for Pride Month, which is in June. I'm not sure if that's a worldwide thing or not, but in the US it's in June. She had a lot of good suggestions. I took 2 of those suggestions. There were also 2 other books she suggested I already had, so I moved that up on my TBR too. But the 2 books she suggested that I bought, the first is Cinema Love by Jiaming Tang. The second is Exhibit by R.O. Kwon. I thought about doing a TBR for Pride Month, but based upon the fact that I didn't do too well with my AAPI Heritage Month TBR, I just decided I'm not going to actually do a TBR. I'm going to try to read some of these books, and at the end of the month I'll just talk about the books that I did read. I don't think TBRs work very well for me, at least in short time frames. It adds an element of stress and anxiety, which isn't really good for reading. So, but I am going to try to read some of these books during the month, and I'll talk about the ones I read. And also, just in my normal reading, I do read some books that would fit in this category too. I recommend, if you are interested in reading some books for Pride Month, that you take a look at Tia's video. I will put a link to her channel in the description of this video. She has a lot of good suggestions, and I am going to revisit her video at a later time and probably read more of the books she suggested. Should mention too that in a previous comment, I don't remember if it was on one of my videos or a comment on one of her videos, but Nix did suggest that I should perhaps relax a little bit on the goals, and that's a good suggestion, so thanks for that, Nix, and I am going to do that. And the final book that I purchased in this week is Scream Queen, a memoir by Yvette Fielding. It's another Nook book. Yvette Fielding was the host of a show called Most Haunted. It was a show that did investigations of supposedly haunted places. I'm really a sucker for those kind of shows. There was Most Haunted. I used to watch. There's one on now still, I think, Ghost Hunters, but I haven't seen it for a while. A friend of mine, Louise, and her friend went to see Yvette give a talk and a signing of her book, and they got to meet her. So that brought her to my attention again. So I'm really looking forward to reading this book, and I want to read it soon so I can discuss it with Louise when it's still fresh in her mind. Finally, I want to talk about the Wobbles I've been working on, because I started talking about that last week, and that's, besides reading and doing these videos, that's the other main hobby that I'm doing right now. And this past week I completed Kiki the Chick, and here's Kiki the Chick. The one I started working on this week is Pierre the Penguin, and this is what the Pierre the Penguin is going to look like. This is the envelope that the supplies come in, and this is where I am right now. This is partway through the body. I'd be interested to hear how your reading week went, any new favorites you had, books you didn't like. If you'd like, please reply in the comments. I know I'd enjoy reading them. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell so you get notified when I upload future videos. I hope you have a wonderful day.